You know what? Let's go around the table. Everybody is at my stream, so I'm going to assume you know who I am, but I'm a Rocket League caster in OCE, who does Rocket League casting events, commentary, etc., sometimes coaching, analysis, whatever around the world. Amphis, introduce yourself, mate.
I'm Amphis. Yeah.
Goodness me.
I play Rocket League. It's a very good game. You should play it sometimes because it's free. Yeah,
Wow.
I play for Ground Zero and we win a lot.
Inspired.
We won last weekend as well. Yeah.
So they won the major, Ground Zero,
Yeah.
who is his team. He got carried by Torsos and Express.
Oi. Come on, man. I did though.
And next up, Daniel.
Yeah, so I'm a clinical psychologist by trade. I got into esports probably about 3 years ago, and I'm doing esports sleep and performance research, and also working with a couple teams as well. So Ground Zero being the main one, but also working with some players in League and Fortnite and Counter Strike as well. But yeah, Rocket League is a bit of a passion for me these days, actually.
Excellent. And Jimmah?
Yeah, look, I'm Jimmah. I guess, not a psych by trade, but I'm a school teacher by trade. New to the esports scene, but been professional coach for the good part of a year now. So yeah, I started with Canberra Havoc, moved to Fury, finally where I am now in GZ, and yeah.
Awesome. So great background on intelligent minds. I did want to point out that somebody in chat, Fernando, said that it looks like you've been busy, Amphis, on Valentine's Day with your 17 girlfriends.
Yeah.
Is this
Yeah,
true?
He knows. Yeah, it is.
At least you didn't have to go to school
Fernando go
today.
way back. Yeah, I know, but I was doing schoolwork all day. I made a bridge, yummy. I made a bridge.
Oh, is it one of those ones where you
Yeah,
load it up and
engineer.
whoever
Yeah.
has the heaviest?
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
Clean.
I did one of those once and failed spectacularly because I did a triple truss, and it was just
What's that?
so instead of doing like two sides of the bridge, I put like one down the middle as well.
Ooh.
So
Oh, we're not allowed to do that.
in theory it would have been good, but
But you messed up.
you
not
have to
meant to
have
do.
you'd have to have all three like very precise, they're the same exactly. So otherwise it causes a lot more stress. Anyway, talking of bridges, I feel like building a Rocket League team, much like a bridge, there's a lot of engineering behind it. The Ground Zero team have been champions from the major. I was going to have a video and then I forgot I had to do casting instead. So sorry guys, no video for last week's major, but came home with $10,000 and the points. And I want to go straight to you, Daniel, because you're the least involved with the team in that, Jimmah is directly the coach and Amphis is playing the video game. So what are your thoughts when you're watching Ground Zero and they're playing well?
What are my thoughts in what sort of respect?
Yeah, well, how do you watch the streams? Do you sit back and relax and just cheer for them, or are you like actually looking going, oh, is Amphis having a bad day today? Like, are you actually looking deep into it?
I'm actually, I'm trying to enjoy the game because, I suppose ever since I got into Rocket League, I mean, I never used to play Rocket League prior to working with Ground Zero at the start of 2020. So it's something I've really got into and I really enjoy. I think it's a great spectator esport, to be honest. I think it's one of the best out there. So I try and enjoy it as much as I can, just in terms of watching the play and sort of knowing the players around the scene as well makes it much more enjoyable. I think when you have connection to people. But I'm also pretty tense, and I'm also analysing the boys, or trying to analyse the boys anyway, to kind of, I suppose, see how the stuff that we work on behind the scenes is being reflected in their gameplay. So there's a lot, I suppose, I'm trying to do all at once. Yeah.
I mean, I can empathise with that because I always watch and I'm like criticising players, casters, production, everything all at the same time. And realistically, I'd love to just sit back and watch. Jimmah, you had a successful weekend this weekend. What was your involvement?
In terms of like our like the actual yeah, thanks, Amphis. No, I mean there's a lot of things to look back on. I think it's like for how we went and how I went specifically, it was all about sort of getting back into form. So, for example, for those who are maybe a bit more familiar with the OCE scene, The holiday period does take its toll in terms of like how teams sort of get back up and running and getting all prepared. And it felt like, while we're all mentally wanting to just continue the momentum that we created in the last few events, it didn't quite happen that way. So I really did feel like we're trying to just gather as much momentum as we can and just hit the major as hard as we can. And I felt like, all the planets aligned for us, and it felt like everything that we did sort of finally triangulated on the peak of, we're going to win Sunday.
Yeah. And one question for Amphis, because this one I haven't talked to you about. Losing the first bracket reset against what is now Riot Gaming, Invisible Ninja, how are you guys feeling mentally? Like, were you down after that, or did that light the fire?
I don't think it lit the fire. I just thought we dismissed it really quick because we just thought, oh, it's a warm-up. We had like an hour break before that. And then at the back of my head, I always had, I think Jules said in Twitch chat before, it's like a common thing for like the losing bracket team to like come up and win the first series and then lose the second one. That's all I was thinking. So Jules won it for us still.
Oh, wow.
Don't Jules.
He paved the way for Torsos to be on the team.
Yeah.
He paved the way for Cringe Society to have some troubles as well.
He basically assisted these 3 wins.
So he never really left ground zero, is what you're saying?
No, he did.
Are you still salty about that?
No, we're that's now. I'm happy.
You're the best. How do you stay on top, though?
Keep playing the game more than other people.
Okay, cool. That's a good intro into our first topic. So you're the champions, but what I want to talk today a lot about is the stuff that happens off the pitch. The stuff that's mentality-wise that are preparing for you on the day and whatnot. And since I was just talking to you, Amphis, I will continue on with that point. What is it that helps you stay motivated to stay on the top? I know there's been multiple teams in the past, and the only team that's really stayed on the top for a long time was Chiefs. They always get complacent at some point and lose motivation, or maybe practice a little bit less, or stop playing ranked. So what is it that you do, or you at least plan on doing, to always stay on top?
For me personally, it's just I want to go to a LAN. I want to see everyone in the LAN. I just want to go somewhere with everyone. I feel like Worlds is probably going to be the first place where that is, and I just want to go to Worlds and then try and perform.
So there's still like a huge just motivation goal right now in front of you.
Yeah,
but after 5 Worlds, is that still going to be the case, do you think?
Yeah, hopefully.
We'll make sure it is.
Yeah. And money's always pretty good. I like winning money.
Yeah, well.
It's really funny. I mean, we actually this is something we've been talking about increasingly in our sessions that we sort of do weekly, and we've got a guy that comes in. He's ex Special Forces, and we talked about this kind of idea with him. Like, how do you maintain the motivation and that sort of that winning edge that you've been working so hard to get over a period of time, and it's hard, and I think the regional that we lost, when we got knocked, I think it was reverse swept by Ninjas. That really hurt, the boys. And I actually think that came along at a really good time for us. I think we use that as a platform to kind of try and learn about, what do we actually, that complacency when it does creep in, and it can be very insidious and it can creep in unknowingly sometimes. What do you do about that? How do you respond to that? So that's something that we've actually spent a fair bit of time talking about.
I think that makes sense. I've seen a lot of teams go by, and even I did coach the Chiefs for a while when they were a long time on top and had the same thing. You'd lose one series and be like, oh, we're not the best of the best of the best, we're not undefeatable, and that gives you a lot of motivation. But I've also seen those teams kind of have insidious kind of issues where you don't actually know what the problem is until it strikes. You don't you feel like you can be on top doing what you're doing because of course it's already working, but then 3 months down the line, that's when it falls apart, and it falls apart huge. And Jimmah, you're probably the one that has to spend the most time, I guess, thinking about this for the players. Is there anything you do to kind of look at, I guess, motivating them to play more ranked, or anything on the pitch to try and find those issues?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, initially, I remember when Torse first joined, like a lot of the issues we could sort of like, yeah, sure, we have like, X, Y, and Z that were problems. But at the end of the day, when we kind of looked at it, it's just like, hey, we're just not reading each other that well.
Mhm.
And that was like early days. And I remember I just put it forward to the boys like, hey, like, would it be fine to just queue up some twos here and there? Just get some team cohesion, get some synergy happening. And, and that was one thing, right? But in terms of the motivation side of things, I think for me, initially, I was quite concerned about burnout. Mm-hmm. So I remember, like, while I never directly brought it up, it was always sort of like, well, I just sort of gauged, how we were sort of tracking along during the holiday period because everyone wants to, move away from the computer. Like I know Express went away, he had a good time in the lake, and Amphis took some time to himself, and everyone sort of found their own way. So as we sort of picked up the pieces and just sort of, incidentally put it all together, for me, it was like, well, let's just, find ways not to have that burnout. And I remember, I was always very receptive if a player was like, you know what, I feel like I can't hack the second hour of a scrim. Like, can we call it short? Or, what, I just need that one day off. And I remember just being like, you know what, like, it's so much better to be like, yep, just have your space, gradually move into it, rather than just be like, no, like, let's step it up. We're not out of the woods yet. Worlds is still right there. We got to go for it. So it was a bit of a balancing act. And I felt like, as Dan said before, losing to Canberra Havoc was just that extra kick in the bottom to sort of be like, you know what, let's get things really into gear now as well.
Excellent. And I guess there have been other teams around the scene. Renegades are a brilliant example right now, but are other teams not performing to the standard? I don't think it's just that Riot Gaming has picked itself up, but other teams are falling to the wayside. And I'm going to go to both Amphis and Daniel and let you decide who can talk first on this. What are your takes? I think we'll go to Amphis first. Because you're going to be very game focused. What are your takes on like the downfall of Renegades and other teams and the reasoning for that stuff?
I don't know. I've always thought, probably back to when we had Jules, Renegades have always stayed at the same level, roughly. They haven't really got worse or they haven't got better. And then now that, since we've been getting better, I think Cringe has been the best that they've been for a very long time as well now. So they just keep on starting to drop, and then obviously we have Riot now. And they just never really got to improving, so they just got forced to make the change, obviously.
Excellent. And Daniel, do you have any insight into those kind of things where people just, I don't know, end up falling down from where they were?
Yeah, I kind of wonder a little bit, and I mean, I can't comment on particular teams because I don't know the inner workings of those teams, but I'm just speculating when I say this. But I do wonder about like the interpersonal style of the team, team cohesion, how they work as a unit, that sort of thing. I mean, that's something that we focus on so much. We really do try and Jimmah and I and Bo, the team owner, really try to work really hard to create a culture where people can feel comfortable, bringing up anything. We call it respectful honesty, where you can say anything you like to a teammate or to myself or to Jimmah or whatever, as long as it's said in the right way, and we can have a conversation about it. And I think, and I just wonder whether or not, over time, without some teams maybe putting a focus on that, whether or not, interpersonal kind of fractures might arise sometimes in teams when things start to go wrong. And I think, Jimmah and I put so much effort into trying to keep our finger on the pulse with this stuff. And I genuinely think the boys get along exceptionally well. And that was the case as well, in season 9, when Decker and Jules and Express were playing. I think we had the same thing. And I think each time that we've had a roster change, we've been able to maintain that when Amphis came through and then when Taurus came through. Like we work so hard. Like when Amphis first came in and then when Taurus came in, we actually have conversations about, like how do we incorporate the new player into the team as effectively as possible? How do we make them feel welcome? How do we support them? How do we make them feel valued? How do we hear them? And then we ask them, what would make that transition better for you? So that's just me speculating, but I wonder a little bit if that might play a part in some of the things that we kind of see around OCE when teams kind of fall apart a little bit.
I do think that might be the case. I was actually speaking with Jimmah the other day about, I guess, motivation of teams, and Renegades have been together for an awful long time. There's other teams around who I just feel aren't like slamming on grinding ranked And I think a lot of that comes from just either staleness of being with the same people, or, you know, again, over time, certain conflicts happen. They never get really resolved and they fester and sort of drive motivation down that way. I guess, Jimmah, as well. What were your thoughts in terms of the motivation of these other teams and the amount that they're playing ranked and grinding, and whether that catches up on you?
Yeah, it's a real hard one to say because, you know, I've been around a few teams now, and something that I've learned is that so many top players, you know, like when you really talk to them long enough, they'll just be, you know what, I do want to be on a top team. I do want to be a winner. Like, I play this game because I want to, you know, make something out of what I'm doing. I mean, you know, there are obviously some players that are quite, you know, complacent. Like, you know what, if I make top 8, I'm happy. But usually when you start talking to teams in the top 4, it's like they've got this desire to be number 1. Mm-hmm. And so there's always like that level of motivation that I'm like, you know what, it can kind of come and go in waves, but it surely would be enough to, you know, toe the line. My big criticism and my big concern, and obviously, like, you know, just to cover this one, I got no insight on the inner workings of other teams, but I do feel like, you know, even us as GZ, like, we can always be at risk of, you know, motivation or desire to sort of fall. But it's like, what kind of social networks do we make to support that, right? And I sometimes wonder, like, well, do other teams have those resources? Like, I mean, you know, Renegades were sort of left to their own devices for majority of the time. Like, obviously, they got you to talk to. They had Lawler in for a little bit. But for the most part, you know, it was them on their own devices. And I wonder, like, when you kind of get in, I guess, an echo chamber of ideas, how much room does that give you to grow? And I wonder, you know, how much that plays into a team's longevity. So, you know, I'd have to directly talk to them to find out. But I feel like, you know, you can sort of get caught hearing your own thoughts and your teammates' thoughts. And, yeah, you sort of begin to, as Amphis say, I think you actually do hit a point where you plateau. And then really it's much easier to decline than it is to improve when you're in a plateau, for sure.
I don't think Michelle, who is Pocket Psych in chat, another psych who works in esports in Australia, had a good point in terms of, you know, just having fun. I guess as soon as relationships can fall apart, that also is a major factor. If you're not having fun, you know, that's another major point that like, you don't have to have motivation if you're just enjoying yourselves. You're just playing a game at that point.
That is one of our team values, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's good.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have them memorized. I'm a good boy.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the meat of potatoes, though. And this is a subject that has been on my mind a lot for obvious reasons. So I've been complaining, as you guys know, you know, whinging, whining, being upset. Whenever anybody asks me how I am, I'll be like, I'm tired. And Daniel was watching my stream one day and noticed, and he reached out to me. And I've been seeing Daniel, who is, as I said, or as he said, a sleep psychologist, about how to sleep. And so this has been a major factor for me. And it also becomes more of a focusing factor in my analysis on a day-to-day basis in the way I look at teams going around. It always was a factor that I always thought that to be a professional, you should probably go to sleep at a time that would allow you to wake up for a tournament, you know, well rested. But now it is such a motivation for me. I wanted to talk to Daniel for this. How important, Daniel, is it that these players who are often staying up till 4 a.m. at night with a tournament at 10 a.m. the next day get some good sleep?
Yeah, I mean, it's critical, right? So this is the focus of my PhD that I'm doing at the moment. So this is what my research is all about. I've been a sleep psychologist for about 7 years now anyway, just working clinically in assessing and treating sleep disorders just in the general population. But I mean, you know, esports is a cognitive game, right? So, you know, it's all about your mental performance. And the research is just crystal clear on this point. Sleep is just critical for your cognitive performance, which means it's critical for your esports performance. So this is how I actually originally got involved with the GZ. So when I started doing my PhD, I reached out to quite a few different teams in Australia, and GZ was the first one to get back to me and sort of say, yeah, we're pretty keen to kind of jump on board this. And sort of, I suppose, look at our players' sleep. So that was with Billy and Express So Billy and Jules and Decker back in 2019. Well, where do we go from here, Yummy? What else? Which direction should we take? There's so many avenues we could take.
What's the difference between them staying up till 4 a.m. every day of the week and then hoping to perform on Saturday and Sunday, or them, going to sleep at 11 p.m. every day and then waking up at 7 a.m. for that 10 a.m. day? What's the difference in performance? How does the brain work differently?
So I'll tell you one study, and this is a landmark study that was done in 2003. So what they found was that 2 weeks of 6 hours of sleep per night had the same cognitive deficits as 2 days of complete sleep deprivation. So just let that sink in for a bit. So 6 hours a night is the same as 2 days of no sleep. That's the same cognitive performance, right?
I couldn't go one day with no sleep, so...
Yeah, totally. But I talk to players around the place that do. I'm working with a Counter-Strike player from the US, and they certainly have had 24 hours of complete sleep deprivation. The other thing that you mentioned, Yummy, which I think is really important, is the timing of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that we literally a week before every kind of major or region, whatever it is, we actually get the boys retiming their sleep pattern, right? So if you've got someone who, typically goes to sleep let's say 3 o'clock in the morning, and then they need to wake up 9 o'clock in the morning for a tournament at 11 or something like that. So 2 things are going to happen. One is that you're going to miss out on sleep, so you're going to have acute sleep loss, right? You won't get enough sleep, which instantly starts to impact your cognitive performance. And the other one, and you and I have talked about this, the timing of your sleep, right? So your body clock has an impact on performance. So there are going to be certain times of the day when you feel more or less sleepy. And a lot of players, and this is something Amphis and I have focused on extensively. Amphis has probably been one of my toughest clients.
Still is.
Players to work. Still is, yeah. He remains so. Yeah, he's quite stubborn. But if you need to play at 9, but you're typically waking up at 11, and then you wake up 2 hours earlier or 3 hours earlier, you're literally going to be starting off the day at what we call your core temperature minimum, right? Which is the lowest point biologically during the entire 24-hour period. So people just will not perform at their best. You can't. Biologically speaking, you're sort of, I suppose, predisposed to perforing poorly. So there's multiple different effects.
Is there what is the regular effect that happens? If I was to compare, one day where I played at 10 a.m. but I woke up normally at midday, and another day where I'd only just woken up and got to play, how would I expect that would affect my performance?
So, multiple different effects. Probably the 2 key ones that come to mind straight away would be processing speed, so your ability to process information quickly and accurately, and which obviously then leads on to your attention, your ability to sustain your attention and selectively attend to things in your environment, which then has an impact on reaction speed and things like that. Memory can be worse. Your ability, tactical awareness can be worse as well. People tend to maintain strategies for longer that are being ineffective rather than being adaptive to things that are going on in game. So multiple different effects. It just depends how sleep deprived you actually are. So some people are obviously far more sleep deprived than others.
Yeah, well, to me, I feel like if you're a professional player and your job is essentially to win, and to go to Worlds, you have to win. You want to get every advantage possible. And Amphis, since you're the one who showed up late one time for a literal tournament on a regional event, I think in the fall split, how much has Daniel helped, do you feel, in terms of your performance? Or are you still stubborn about staying up late, sleeping late?
No, it definitely does help a lot. I just like TikTok. TikTok's a very good app, Yummy, and you should get it. And it's very addictive, and I watch it a lot at night. But no, I always knew that it was important because back when we had the 9 a.m. games when it was league play ages ago, I had school, so my sleep was good accidentally.
Yeah, Amphis does much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, Amphis does much better during the school term than he does during holidays.
Yeah. That's why we won the major, because that was my first week back at school. So first week being normal.
The school acts as an anchor for him, which is really, really helpful.
Yeah, but
it's,
bad at the same time.
I've spoken to quite a few. Like I've sort of talked to different teams, Yummy. So like I've spoken to like the Mind Freak boys, for example, some of the Direwolves lads as well, and most of them have like all of the people that I've spoken to have actually been really receptive to the idea of trying to actually improve their sleep. Like they've shown a genuine interest and in kind of learning more about it and what they can sort of do to improve their sleep, which I think is fantastic. So it's just about trying to spread the word, really. I think this is it's a good professional habit to get into, and I think the overall the better for OCE when you've got a whole region who kind of takes something that does have an effect on your performance, seriously, and prioritize it.
Did you check out Dr. K after our last chat?
No, I haven't yet. No.
You should do a stream one day where you teach people like how to fix their sleep schedules and stuff like that, just in a very general way. Because I think a lot of people kind of know that they should sleep early, but the general strategy is like, I'm just going to pull an all-nighter and be so exhausted that the next day I do it. And like,
I don't think you should do that stream. That's a bad idea. People will listen. Decker will be listening.
Well, Decker's good with his sleep. I mean, I spoke
it?
to Decker just the other night, and he was saying that he's still doing everything we talked about. Like a week before tournaments, he gets his sleep in order, which is fantastic. I'm so happy that like he's remembered that stuff and he still does. I think that's great.
Yeah, man.
Just out of curiosity, Yummy, like what were the biggest challenges you found? I suppose in terms of the process that we went through, trying to improve your sleep.
Well, for me, I was already so exhausted because I was kind of on that 6 hours sleep a night, like not voluntarily, like involuntarily, every single night, and was struggling enough already. So during that time, it kind of stuck me at also being at 6 hours a night every single night because I was always sleeping a little bit earlier every day. And I think the biggest thing I struggled with is like just being able to get the right tune in at the end of the day, because you always have this like, or me, I'm very habitual. And so at the end of the night, maybe before at like 11 p.m., I'd turn off the lights. I'd have my last glass of water, that sort of stuff, and I'm going to bed at 2 a.m. But when you're changing that, all of a sudden, all your night schedule messes everything up. You end up on your phone watching TikTok till 2 a.m., that kind of thing. And that was the hard part. Getting up early, you've got an alarm, you just suck it up and be a man and go do the things that you need to do, which, for those out there, I had to go get an hour to two of sun every single morning as I reeled in my clock a quarter an hour to half an hour earlier every day until it was at the right time. And then maintaining that's also really hard. So
it's the maintenance, isn't it? Yeah. See, Yummy was much more compliant than you, Amphis.
Oh well. He didn't win the major though, did he?
I kind of did. I was there on the major grand final. So
oh yeah, true.
That's my version of winning a major. Jimmah, have you noticed a lot of this? Are you getting more in depth on the sleep stuff or even just outside performance stuff?
Yeah, massively. I mean, that was something that I noticed before my times on GZ, was just some of the sleep schedules of professional players. And look, to be fair, like, we all have some intuitions about our sleep. Like, we all know what it feels like to be, sleep deprived and all that. And usually people, they find their own habits with their sleep and whatever it is, right? But I think when we brought on Dan and we actually got some real professional intervention, and I think a really good thing that Dan did, right, is that he really, like, not that you have to sell science, but sometimes it really pays to have like a target audience. It's like, hey, your awareness, like for example, Dan did the classic comparison between blood alcohol level and your awareness, right? So if you're X amount sleep deprived, how your cognitive function is that of someone who's had X amount of standard drinks. And I'd love for the next step to be like, you know what, if you're this sleep deprived, your input lag has been increased to this, whatever it is, and that would just get gamers like that. But it was really good though, because like, Dan was quite clinical with it, and clinical in that, hey boys, every day, tell me how you're sleeping. When are you waking up? What are you doing? Did you wake up during the night? How long did it take you to sleep? When did you turn the lights off? and we just do like a little bit of a feed through like that. And it got to a point where I could tell there was a difference, quite quickly. And even got to a point where, like, take Tuesday, Wednesday coming on by, even I'd be at the tail end of scrims. All right, boys, let's really make sure, sometimes I'll even do the guilt trip. I'll be like, hey, Dan's put a lot of time into us. Let's make sure we're doing it right. So just because you're going to bed at 10 doesn't mean, you're in a bed at 10. Put down the phone, get some good sleep. And I feel like when our sleep is good, just even the team environment's better. Not just our gameplay, but just how energetic we are, enthusiastic we can be. So I feel like it not only enhances gameplay, it almost just enhances your general well-being entirely. So, it was just an excellent thing to double down on.
Excellent. I actually empathize as well with you on that whole, I told them it was important to sleep. Because obviously I've coached multiple teams, and I think reciprocity, especially when I was coaching them, I'd talk to Farah and Chaussette. It's even harder for them because their RLCS starts at often as late as 4 p.m. kind of thing. So convincing them to get some proper sleep and being normal human beings in some way is even more difficult. But yeah, I think now, at least that I've talked with Daniel, I'm at least equipped with some of the tools and knowledge to be able to at least convince people and tell them a little bit about sleep that I could probably do a better job of convincing now.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, that's fantastic, because that's, honestly, that's one of the things that I hope that everyone walks away from, I think any psychologist would hope for this, right? Mm-hmm. Is where, someone that you've worked with walks away and goes like, I feel, like I've got knowledge and skills that I didn't have before, and maybe I can actually help to, even help other people in some sort of way moving forward. I think that's brilliant.
One last question specifically about sleep, that was raised in the chat. So before we move on, what is the best time to wake up for a 10 a.m. tournament?
Best time to wake up? Yeah, I mean, so we're assuming that the event goes all day type of thing, as in
let's assume it goes till 3 p.m. at the latest.
Okay.
No, 5 p.m. at the latest. 5 p.m. at the latest. Yeah.
At 10 a.m. start, I mean, anywhere between probably 7 and 8 would be fine. Maybe even maybe closer to 7, maybe closer to 7:30. That would give you, and that's assuming that you're getting enough sleep, right? Like you're going to sleep appropriately the night before to get enough sleep.
Yeah.
And an appropriate wake up time would be between 7 and 8 sometime. That would give you enough time to kind of warm up, wake up, sleep inertia drops off. Your body clock starts to pick up for the day.
Yeah.
One of the things, some people do that, they wake up, like I said, either later than the start time usually, or they wake up very close to the start time, and both of those are quite unhelpful strategies. So the other thing I would say is you really need to kind of have good sleep, leading up to the event, not just the night before or the night before that, or a couple of days. It really has to be at least a solid week, I would say, before the event. That lead in is quite important. Yeah.
Well, that was my personal experience, is that when I've had the most energy, I had 2 weeks of solid sleep. That's how long it took me to again feel like a regular human being. And then a week later I had an EU broadcast, and that really got all over again. So
that threw a spanner in the works.
It hasn't got back to being good sleep again, but we're doing better. We're doing much better than we were before. As a quick point as well, TK said that Amphis yawned, so it's bedtime. We've talked multiple times, but very specifically, there's I guess an ebb and flow of energy, right? If you're waking at 7 a.m., is there a time during the day, during that 10 to 5 p.m. where you feel like you're going to have a lull in energy? Is there something you could do during those as well, like caffeine or anything like that?
Yeah, so for the average person who wakes up, or let's say goes to sleep around about, let's say 10:30, 11 and wakes up about 7. So between about 2 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there's going to be what we call a post-lunch dip, where you naturally feel more sleepy and less alert, and your performance will be impacted during that time. So you can't help that, right? That just happens naturally. You can mitigate though, and caffeine is probably the most common strategy that people sort of typically use to kind of try and get through that, trying to bridge that kind of lull as best they can. If feasible, there's nothing wrong with a nap during that time, if you can actually find the time to do that. although you wouldn't want to do it too close to an upcoming game either. So you need to be careful in terms of what you actually do. But caffeine's probably the safest bet at that point.
Yeah, and caffeine's fine, but you probably is it better to just wait till you're tired, or do you do it?
Oh, you'd probably do it a lead in. So for example, like if you consistently wake up about 7, and you knew that you typically feel, let's say, sleepy at 3 p.m. and you had a game coming up at 3 p.m. Like a lead up would be like, let's say, 2:30, maybe even like 2 o'clock. You might sort of have a dose of caffeine, because it takes about half an hour to get into your bloodstream anyway. So to get that kick at the right time, you'd want to time the caffeine, but you don't want to have too much either, because then it might harm your sleep the next night or the upcoming night. And if it's a multi-day event and you're playing on the Sunday, you want to make sure, of course, you're not having too much either at that point.
Is there a detriment to, say, having a coffee in the morning as well, or a couple of coffees before even that?
Oh, yummy.
And then going into it?
Is there a detriment?
Yeah, what's better? Just like not drinking coffee all day or caffeine or whatever, and then having it before that big lull? Or...
I would try and target caffeine use rather than having like a blanket approach. I would try and make it targeted. You just got to keep in mind that caffeine has a really long half-life, right? So it's about a 5 to 7 hour half-life, I should say. So let's just say 5 hours after you've had a dose of caffeine, half of it is still in your system. So if you have 4 coffees across the day and your last one's at 6 o'clock, I mean, your caffeine could be like super high still by the time you actually get to bed. So you got to be careful about not like overdosing, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I would sort of say trying to time it before games is probably your best bet. But it's the right dosage, the right timing. That's the critical point, and it depends on the time of the game and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, my half-life for coffee is like 15 hours, so if I have any coffee, I don't sleep that night somehow.
Super sensitive to it, yeah.
Great. Well, I think it's really important to sleep. I'm going to reiterate it many times, but if you're a competitor and you are literally not now taking the advice of Daniel to wake up at 7:30 a.m. on the weekend, you are literally not a real professional in my eyes, and you shouldn't get paid a salary.
I totally agree. Yep.
Yeah.
You got to take it seriously. I think there's a level of disadvantages and advantages that people are getting right now that others are not taking advantage of. Anyway,
we actually just one bit, Yummy, just on that point, right? Like, I mean, on that professionalism point, I mean, like, I totally agree, and we've actually talked about this, like accountability to the rest of your team. So like if you've got 2 teammates who are doing the right thing and they're trying to prioritize their sleep, and you've got one team member who's not doing the right thing, then in some way they're not being accountable to the rest of their team, right? Like they're not doing the best job they possibly can. It's like not rocking up to a scrim or something like that, leading into a major. You're just not doing the right thing by your team. So like I totally think that having that team accountability, where it's like, we're all in this together. And we're all busting our guts here, so we all need to do the right thing in other areas, including sleep as well.
Excellent. I'm fully on board for banning players for a month if they didn't sleep. If they slept past 7:30 on the morning of a tournament. Okay, so obviously, you guys, final sort of topic in terms of mentality and that sort of stuff is dealing with the pressure of high play. And I want to go straight to Amphis, because you actually came straight into the scene realistically. You played your first RLCS at the beginning of last year, and it never really felt like you got nervous. So you're not necessarily the best person to ask how to deal with pressure or anything like that, but do you get nervous on game day, in big matches, anything like that?
No, not really. I don't know why, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's just
you know what the trick is, Yummy?
What?
You just need to be an overconfident 17-year-old, and that's the solution.
Oh yeah, I forgot. You just got to be 12 years old, and you don't care what's happening in life.
It's not even conceivable emotion.
Yeah. It's like nerves. What nerves? Yeah.
I'm invincible. There's no possible way I could lose.
I don't know. It's just weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the way to cope with it would be, if you do get nerves, get your teammates to help you, I reckon. Yeah. Is
there though, like, obviously I would ask any player, and 90% of them would say I was not nervous, but they're clearly playing different. There's a pressure on the pitch, and do you feel any kind of pressure? Do you feel like you play slightly different in tournament than in scrims, that kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's just like, when it means something, you just like want to play. Maybe like trying to play too quick.
Yeah.
Is usually what people do, and then they miss the ball, and then they just start playing worse than what they usually do.
So how do you manage that, Jimmah, right? Like if Amphis is suddenly playing extra fast or not passing or whatever, he's done it a million times in scrims. How do you get him closer to that?
Yeah, so sometimes it's really incidental, this, and it is really hard because it does really... It takes a lot of self-awareness for this one. But so, for example, like... You know, there's a saying that I really follow, and it's from a lot of the research that I've done on this, but basically, you know, perfect practice makes practice perfect. And what you want to do is you want to try to, you know, basically play till you can to the match conditions. Obviously, that's not always the case on scrims, but you try to, right? And sometimes it's really good to just grab onto, let's say, like a defensive play you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's very easy to get caught up on, so-and-so challenged, someone's on backboard, this guy's going back boost, you know, and like it's very easy to get caught up in the gameplay. But sometimes just paying attention just to the energy of the comms itself can make a difference. So, for example, on a scrim, they're usually quite calm because, you know, there's nothing really on the line other than, well, you got your scrim, right? And so let's say a team, you know, like I'll just give one example of a comm, right? And the comm might be, you've got time or time on the ball, whatever it might be. You know, every team should have that comm where it's like, you know, you've got time on the ball. Now, in a scrim, it's usually quite calm. You got time, take your time. You can 50 that, you know, take it, whatever it is. And then on game day, you might find that the arousal, the excitement's quite high. And all of a sudden, the comm is nothing like what it was on scrims. It's now like, oh, time, you know, like they're shouting it, right? And the issue is that the intensity and the energy was so different that it created unnecessary urgency in the play. So suddenly the player who's been screamed at that they have time now, you know, they hear the tone and they're like, you know what, I've got to pinch it across wherever I can, and they give the ball away. And so sometimes, like for me, I'll be in, well, I'm always in comms on game day. Sometimes I'll just pick up that. It's like, hey, boys, let's just make sure we're doing X, Y, and Z. And just a reminder, sometimes, you know, most of the time I'll put it on them. Hey, boys, what do we think we're missing right now? Hey, you know what? I think we're not trusting this play enough. All right, well, what do we need to do? Well, you know, we need someone to actually start comming earlier, like what we normally do, whatever it might be. And so, you know, and even though it's not directly gameplay, you're adjusting the dials on, let's say, something that involves arousal, and that in turn impacts the gameplay, I think, astronomically, just something as minute as that. So, yes, that's sort of where my play into it all comes through when it comes to excitement, arousal, nerves, all of that stuff.
What about values, Jimmah, like in the actionable behaviour stuff that we do? Like, how do you think that fits into what you're saying?
Oh, it's actually awesome. So this is a huge thing. So there's a reason why professional sporting clubs, like if you played footy or whatever it might be, usually your club's got some team values. There's absolutely no reason why esport teams shouldn't have them. So we've got our team values, and sometimes, you know, there might be a value that we have a hard time, you know, replicating, and sometimes it's just a reminder of the boys, like, hey, like, you know, are we actually exhibiting these values right now? And the best thing, and this is, you know, it brings a tear to mine and Dan's eye, but the other day I actually ticked off all three players, so Express, Taurus, and Amphis, all brought up, hey, like, let's stick to this value. All right, let's make sure we keep doing this. And it was just real cool because, like, just by mentioning the value, you're describing a concept that the whole team understands and knows. So it's like, all right, done. I know what that looks like. Let's get back into it. So, yeah.
So that's one of the things, Yummy, that like when I'm watching the boys, I'm really sort of looking to see whether or not they're actioning the values that, you know, that we kind of, I suppose, ascribe to. And like, you know, win or lose, I'm just happy if they do that. Yeah. Obviously, you feel happier if you win, but you know, like then if we lose but we go down sticking to our values, then I'm happy with that as the team psych. Yeah.
What was an example of these? What was it? Actionable values, whatever they're called.
Actionable behavior. Yeah.
Actionable behaviors. What's an example of these values? Doesn't have to be one that you use, but like just so everyone can wrap their head around what you're exactly talking about.
Don't do one we use. Don't dox it.
So like a value, right, is just a guiding principle for how you conduct yourself. But a value is just a concept unless you actually know how to action it. I mean, it's just a word, right? Like, you know, loyalty could be a value. And it's like, oh, yeah, loyalty, that's a value I like. But, you know, how do I action loyalty? You know, like what do I actually do through my behavior to sort of demonstrate that I'm sticking to that value? So an actionable behavior is just something like a behavior that demonstrates the value that you're kind of, I suppose, trying to stick to. So actually, Amphis, why don't you give us an example, mate? I'm going to throw this to you, dude. What's an actionable behaviour from one of our values? You can say one of the values, doesn't matter.
Oh, I can't use one of ours because then people will use it and then we start losing.
What about camaraderie, right? So that's one of our values.
We've lost Amphis. Now all the other teams are going to get along.
Oh, I cannot believe it. No, camaraderie. I know it just helps, especially on game day when you all know that you're all on like the same page. There's no pressure from like each of your teammates. It just like lets you be a bit more free. You're not scared to like bring up any issues in the team, and you can usually just talk them all out if everyone knows about it. Yeah.
And let's say like someone makes a mistake, right? Which happens, I mean, all the time. Like it's just inevitable. Like I suppose an unhelpful way to respond to that might be, either let's say a teammate getting stuck into one of their teammates, or maybe more commonly, like not saying anything, just going silent. So you're sitting with that. Oh, I've just made a mistake, and my teammates aren't saying anything. Yeah. And so we all know that I just made a mistake, right? And we're all and then it's the next play or whatever. So like Amphis, what would you do in that sort of situation, mate?
What if I made the mistake, or
no? If one of if Force or Express made a mistake, what would you do? Would you go silent? Would you get into them? What would you do?
Say unlucky, and then you just like encourage them, and then try and move on as soon as possible. Just everyone makes mistakes, and you just need to try and adapt and move on.
You make mistakes, Amphis?
Oh, they're really rare, young man. Really rare.
Never misses an opportunity to stroke his own ego, to be honest.
Yeah.
I left that wide open for you, though. In terms of other stuff, is there anything else mentality-wise that you guys work on in nerves? I know Torsos has always been like I'd say passionate player. He's spent a lot of times being very nervous at Worlds, and he's been there so many times that he is 9,000 times better than he was. But is there stuff that you do to work on that the nerves and the pressure?
I feel like it's different for everyone because like Torse plays the game like 12 hours a day leading up to like a big tourney, and I just like could never do that.
Yeah.
Ever. If anything, I'd like my hours get a bit lower like the week leading up to it. I don't know. It's just like you need to find what works for you. Leading up to a tourney and feel comfortable with how you've led up to it.
I had something like that because I'm a very nervous person myself. I get really, really, really nervous, like even for some of the dumbest stuff. And it's just something I'm used to now. And I get less nervous than I used to. You go back to my ILCS Season 3 analyst desk at Worlds, and I almost break down. I almost don't get my first sentence out. You can see me, I actually stumble at the very beginning, and then I bring it back. And now that's fine, but I'm still, even for the first ESL event, like I've done a million OC events. The first ESL event, I was nervous at the start of it. And now I go there and it's like, day to day, it's nothing. But what I did when I played is I would never scrim or play Rocket League on the Saturday before the Sunday event because it was like, well, if I'm not doing that, I'm not taking the game quite as seriously. I'm not putting all the effort all my entire life. Even if I'd literally spent 120 hours the past 2 weeks on the game, as long as I didn't spend that Saturday on it, I was fine.
Yeah. So something that I like to add to this as well, and this is always the case, right? Is a lot of confidence and stuff can come from like having just really good feedback, and I mean like not just like, oh, you're doing great, but having ongoing feedback, I guess, about your performance. So for example, I feel like so much confidence can come from really well done preparation. So I mean, it often feels like when a major comes around, a lot of teams kind of do that last minute cramming. Now we all know what that looks like. We've all either finished high school, done our exams, maybe on Amphis, he'll be there soon. Or, even in university, right, you always have those people that are just as calm as, I know what's on the exam. I've been studying all semester long. And you got that one person who's like, I spent the last 3 days cramming, and and you can sort of see the energy between them. Obviously, it's not always a cookie cutter fit right there. But I have quickly learnt that, when players have ongoing feedback, they're confident with, like how they're stacking up with, their progress, the team's progress. It kind of gives you a little bit of an extra, like, I feel a bit of a safety net to be like, you know what, like now the only nerves I really have are just that pre-game excitement. It's like, let's trust in the process. And I hear that a lot from like our boys particular, right? We're just like, hey, like, like for example, when we went down to Fenrir, it was like water on a duck's back. Like, hey, like we know how to beat these guys. This is fine. And then we pulled it back again and we didn't get reverse swept and we pulled through. Or even especially when we went down to Riot, they took the first game. We all got up. We just had a bit of a walk around. We just got a fresh air. We just had a hard reset. We're like, we know how to beat these guys. And it was just sort of like this mental switch that kind of flicks and you're back in the zone. And, and that's to sort of come about incidentally. Like some things you micromanage with nerves, certain things work with certain players, whatever it might be. But eventually when you come as a team and you sort of work out, how it functions as a team, then I feel like, just as you said, it's like another day in the office. All right, now we know what to do. Our preparation's paying off here.
I would say that having Jimmah there is so valuable. So like he acts like a real anchor for the boys as well. And so that's why I think having a coach kind of around the place during matches is just critical. I think like we've benefited so much from having Jimmah come on board partway through last year. So you tell us, Amphis, like how do you find having Jimmah there on match day?
No.
Like that kind of like have I set you up here, Jimmah?
Oh, he's gonna say, should I deafen?
At least for your mentality.
No, it's usually like. I know back in Fury before we got Jimmah, it's like between a game, like after you lose a game, it's just usually quiet for a minute, and then the second the game starts, that's the first time that you speak. Whereas like when you have Jimmah, it's like an extra voice. He like gets you talking before the next game. How are we gonna win the next one? Yeah. You're good, Jimmah. Keep it up.
Oh, thanks.
Well,
You're so useful.
Here's an interesting scenario, and I'll go to Daniel on this very briefly. What do you think is better? Do you think it's better to have not a bad coach, but a useless coach, somebody who just sits there and talks between games, or no coach whatsoever?
Well, I've got a big opinion on this one. But yeah, go Dan.
Can we go to Jimmah first? I'm keen to hear. I need to have a think about this. Yeah.
So, something that I've said, because I've had a lot of people come up and ask me just like, hey, where can I find coaches? We want to get people involved. And I've just said, hey, you can actually train a coach in a way. Like you can actually be like, hey, this is sort of what we want as a team, because really professional players across all sports, they know, they have strong intuitions of where the development needs to go. None of them walk around thinking, I'm God, I'm the best, I'm just going to win everything. A lot of them know where their strengths and weaknesses are. Maybe not all, but I'd say 90+% do. So anyway, I've always encouraged people to find coaches, because I said, even if you have a coach who's in training, so they're not the best coach, in fact, maybe the advice they might give, you sort of take with a grain of salt. Like most of it's a bit like, oh, that's a bit interesting, right? I feel like just by having someone there, having that extra set of eyes, it creates a bit of a professional tone. So Amphis has told me before, and Amphis, I hate to bring this up, but we got to. Amphis goes, yeah, it's a lot harder to troll in scrims when Jimmah's watching. I don't want to waste his time.
That's a good point.
So, and for some
Dad's
teams,
around,
well, that's what Dan said. It's like, so when Dad's not there, what happens, boys, and whatever it is. But seriously though, but all jokes aside, it can bring that extra dimension of professionalism, and it's like, well, we don't want to waste each other's time here. Like we're all here to win, to find progress, and just by that presence alone, the tone can just change that little bit for the better. Obviously, there can be coaches who can tear down teams, and those are quite common stories in Rocket League. But I think, depending on the coach, even if their skills aren't at probably the expected level, sometimes the presence alone can make the difference, I feel.
Yeah, I would sort of, so I agree with Jimmah. So I think as long as the coach is not doing harm, even if they're not doing any good, it's probably still better to have him there. If they were doing harm, obviously, well, then that's a story. But if
Like
they're
an
if they're
Enigma,
just
like an
if
Enigma.
they're like just neutral, then having them there probably overall has probably a greater net benefit than not having them there at all, I suppose. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of variables there, but yeah.
Yeah, there
Well-
is.
Well, I agree too.
Tough
Like
question.
that's my thought. Like people come to me and they're like laughing at somebody on Gamers Ready or something as a coach, and I'm like, mate, if you got that guy as a coach, you'd get better. And people who come to me, like I do, like paid coaching, people come to me and I tell them like, you're literally going to get better by the fact that you're paying me. I could say nothing and you paid me $50 and you will be better as a team. And I could just go off and do nothing because just the fact that they paid me means that they're investing themselves into Rocket
Totally.
League.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of crazy stuff around that. If you have a coach that you disagree with, I think that's good. I had Stormclawed when I
Big
was
time.
getting better, and he was a good coach, and he got me onto some really good mentality things. But on pitch stuff, half the time, I would just say to him, "No, we're not doing that. That's incorrect. We were not going to play like that." Sometimes we would say, "Yeah, that makes sense," and that would be good. But the act of disagreeing with someone solidifies your opinion as a team as well, just being able to discuss.
Big time. And like, you know, that discourse that it can stimulate is huge, right? And I feel like there is sort of, I don't know how else to describe it, but there's sort of like a mental shift that you take. So for example, most teams will form, I'd say pretty much every team will form without a coach. And it's actually quite a big decision for a team to go, you know what? Let's bring in another resource. You know, we don't have all the answers. We can't just grind this thing. You know, like obviously you can and you're going to improve without a coach regardless most of the time if you're a newly formed team. But for a team to go, you know what, like, let's get that extra dimension in. Let's get the extra set of eyes, you know, and it literally is another dimension because, you know, they're watching from a spectator's position. And it's great, you know, like I actually love it. So, for example, sometimes I'll say to the boys, like, hey, I actually don't know what we're talking about here. Do you mind showing me in a replay what that actually looks like? Because, you know, sometimes, you know, I might bring up ideas or a player might bring up ideas and, you know, whether we agree or not, that's not really important. It's more the discourse that is stimulated about where to go next. So, yeah, I'm certainly there with you on that one.
Wait, Amphis, have you ever disagreed strongly with anything that Jimmah has said?
Hundreds of times. What are you talking about?
And then did you call him mad and a kid and
I'm
when?
trying to think of an example.
Oh, there's too many.
I don't. Wait. I actually can't think of any, to be honest. We definitely have though.
To be
'Cause
fair,
I hate Jimmah.
yeah. Well, to be fair, I am quite diplomatic. Like, for example, I'll be like, hey,
Jimmy was very diplomatic.
you boys are the professionals here. You guys know, guys, you know this game better than I do, right? So a lot of the times I'll be like, hey, I might posture an idea, and Em's be like, no, that's silly. Cars don't flip like that. Like, okay, that's fine. You know what I mean? Well, how do they flip Amphis? Well, they do it like this, and you'll tell us how it all works, and then we work it out. So,
See, I'm very confident in my knowledge, but I do the same thing. I let them take advantage. Like, coaching's easy. You don't actually have to know anything. You just
Starting
pose
conversation.
things, and if they disagree, it's good. If they agree, it's good.
We do the same thing in the psych sessions, don't we, Jimmy? Like Amphis, like we have a conversation, but we don't necessarily always have, or I don't necessarily always have the answers, or Jimmy doesn't always have the answers to some of the questions that we pose in our sessions. But through discussing it, you know, usually we come to a helpful conclusion. So I think it's a good process to go through.
yeah. And like when you think about it, like any professional sport, the coach isn't sitting there, you know, being like super technical on their form, right? Like, you know, like, so for example, if I was to coach, like, let's say a silver player, sure, I'm happy to sit there and be like, hey, you know, like triangle does ball cam, way you go, champ, you know, that kind of thing. But, you know, like, you know, Roger Federer's coaches and sitting there like, all right, here's how you hold your racket and here's how you line up a foot. No, not at all. So, you know, I think like a lot of us have the image of like a real top down admin model. Like Dan and I are just like, this is how you rotate. You got to challenge here. You got to grab this boost here. And really it's like, Well, put it this way, Yummy. Like, imagine if I had that relationship with Torsos. How quick would that fizzle out? All right, mate. You know what I mean? If I just
He'd
told
stop
you,
respecting you, right? Like,
Oh yeah, I just feel like, yeah, mate, your boost pad runs for and I do it like this. You know, it would it never work. So you know, you work with the knowledge of the players that you you know that are in the team.
To be fair on Torsos, when I first coached him on Alpha Sydney, he was the player who would very actively listen to everything and anything I said. I was the expert. I could tell him something and he would do that.
Yeah.
I think our relationship evolved in multiple times that I coached him to a point where, like, more I was trusting him and I would point out issues that he had, you know, and then he can deal with how to fix that.
You know what? To add more to that one, to be completely fair, you know, to Tors, he, like, when he realizes, like, you know, the value in certain things, whether it's like, you know, team dynamics, culture, sleep, whatever we're talking about, right? You know, if he can make the connections of like, like this literally translates to winning, like, you know, he really is a person who will put his teammates first and, you know, and find that grind, you know, contrary to maybe some popular belief out there, but, you know, I could definitely see, you know, I've seen the receptiveness that he's brought in before.
Oh, yeah. He's fit into the team exceptionally well, I would say.
Yeah.
He's also got a good... Well, I guess one final question for Amphis. You and Torsos have specifically fit in quite well since his addition in terms of your passing plays, like air dribble passes. You guys seem to know where each other will end up with say an air dribble pass.
Yeah.
Do you guys calm that, or is it something that's come naturally, or is it something you've developed?
It's both, to be honest. Like when we were teaming with him, like at the very start, it was really bad because like I've never teamed with someone that can get like 24 touches on the ball in like midair, and I don't know how he does it sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, once you get used to it, you literally just wait on the ground, let him dribble past like the 3 players, and then you get the open net. So yeah, it's definitely been natural, but then there's a bit of comms in it, like one more, all that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And he's pretty good at the game as well.
Yeah, that does help.
Yeah.
Okay, and then one final question for Daniel, since I don't really get you, or you've never been on a chat show in the Rocket League community before. So I wanted to know, and because you're somewhat of a psych yourself, how does stress, finances, you know, school exams, that sort of stuff, stress change or maybe affect people's performances on the weekend?
I mean, I would say significantly. I mean, we did a research paper. I mean, there's heaps of research out there, but specifically with esports, one of the things that we found in a paper that we published recently was that, I mean, players stress quite a lot about a whole variety of things. So we were working with some players in South Korea and LCK, and obviously, you know, they've got a lot riding on their positions in the team, and they were thinking about a whole range of different things leading up to the competition, right? You know, like how well they're going to perform. What does that mean for their spot on the roster? You know, the sort of interpersonal dynamics with the rest of the team. That would then have an impact on sleep. So, for example, about 50% of players that we've sort of included in our research so far have actually suggested to us that they sleep poorly the night before a match. So purely from a sleep perspective, obviously there's a really strong relationship between stress and sleep. So sleep is just very sensitive to the effects of stress. People can be very preoccupied on match day as well, the more stressed they are. And things can spiral. So it's a bit of a domino effect. That's probably the best way that, I suppose the best analogy I can sort of think of, is that sort of one thing just leads to another. And then within the context of a team, it's like a multiple domino effect, you know, so you can affect your teammates. There can be a sort of, I suppose, reciprocal effect back to you, depending on how your teammate responds to you. So I would say it's like quite pervasive. That's a very general kind of answer, but does that make sense?
Yeah, and I kind of wonder, can it go the opposite way? The more you focus on fixing your sleep and having better sleep, the less stressed you are, so the better you sleep?
I would say the more confident you are in your sleep, the better you will sleep for sure. Yeah.
So what you're saying is that every team and esports professional should get a sleep psychologist.
Oh, I highly recommend it.
I do as well.
Or at least
I'll up that too.
at least a psychologist. I mean, sleep psychologists are a bit of a niche kind of area within psychology, so there aren't many around. But definitely, I mean, I would suggest to any team to get a psychologist as a starting point. And then, you know, a lot of sports psychs as well, you know, have knowledge about sleep, even if they're not specifically trained in behavioural sleep medicine. But yeah, if you can get your hands on a sleep psych, by all means, go for it.
I think that's a good bombshell to end on. So
There we go.
thank you, all three of you.
Throw that
for
pebble in
coming
the
on.
pond.
Yeah, I
let
love
it
it.
ripple out.